72 million years ago, our planet was a very different place. There were no humans, no great apes, no polar bears, no dogs, no fish, not even any birds. And also there were no forests, no grass, no clouds, no bees, and no rain. It was a world of strange beasts, bizarre plants, and a hellish sky without an ozone layer. 72 million years ago, Earth was in the midst of the Cretaceous period, an age of terrifying marine reptiles, gigantic flying insects, and armored dinosaurs. But that would soon change because 72 million years ago, a massive asteroid would slam into our planet, bringing an abrupt end to the age of dinosaurs. It's a well-known fact that when the asteroid slammed into Earth, it killed off around 75% of all species on the planet. But what most people don't know is how truly horrible the apocalypse was for the unlucky few who survived the impact. In the minutes, hours, and days after the asteroid struck, survivors experienced things beyond their wildest nightmares. They witnessed forests set ablaze by a sky full of fire. They saw giant waves hundreds of feet high inundate entire continents. And they watched helplessly as their friends and family were cooked alive in a skyrocketing inferno. This is the story of the day the Earth was on fire. When the asteroid struck, the impact blast alone killed off countless creatures. However, it wasn't long before the real killing started. The asteroid was made of pure iridium, a dense, silvery white metal that's extremely rare here on Earth. Since iridium is so dense, the asteroid weighed over 10 billion tons. And when it slammed into the planet at 43,000 miles per hour, it vaporized instantly upon impact. That created a fireball so hot it ignited the forest around the impact site. Survivors of the initial explosion were immediately engulfed in flames. The air grew thick with choking smoke as entire trees burst into flames and fell crashing down. The ground shook violently as the heat from the fireball melted rock and dirt, causing massive boulders to tumble down nearby hills. In the immediate aftermath of the impact, many animals fled for their lives, only to be incinerated in the growing inferno. Some creatures were so badly burned their entire bodies turned to ash. Creatures like armadillos curled up into a ball and died trying to protect their young. Large animals like sauropods were engulfed in flames and burned to death before they could escape. Many more were simply too stunned or frightened to move and just stood there and burned to death. And while all this was happening, the survivors desperately ran for their lives. Herbivores panicked, trampling through the underbrush, desperate to get away from the burning forest. Carnivores gave chase, eager to take advantage of the chaos and devour the terrified herbivores. But they were all running out of time, as the forest around them turned into a fiery tomb. Creatures like Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat, chased down fleeing herds of animals, only to find their prey cooked to death by the time they caught up to them. These predators had no choice but to turn back and flee themselves. They weren't going to eat a meal that was already well done. But it wasn't just large animals that suffered this fate. Insects, birds, and even microorganisms were all wiped out in the immediate aftermath of the impact. Birds fell from the sky, their bodies charred black by the intense heat. Their eggs were cooked inside their nests, and their chicks burned to death before they had a chance to hatch. Insects that couldn't fly, like beetles, were trapped in sticky tree sap, slowly baking to death as the forest around them turned into a fiery tomb. Even the smallest creatures on Earth weren't safe from the wrath of the asteroid. As the forest burned, millions of animals died, not from the fire itself, but from smoke inhalation. The air grew thick with soot, making it hard to breathe. Every animal that tried to flee the burning forest choked to death, their lungs filling with ash and smoke. Fish weren't safe in the water either. The impact had generated such a powerful shockwave that it caused massive waves hundreds of feet high to race across the planet. These waves were so strong that they capsized boats and dragged unsuspecting swimmers underwater. Fish were pulled to the surface by the violent churning of the water and left gasping for air as the water around them turned to scorching hot plasma. And while all this was happening, the sun beat down on the planet, turning the sky into a furnace and cooking everything beneath it alive. For some animals, it was quick and painless. Smaller creatures like lizards simply dried up and blew away in the wind. Others like turtles were literally cooked inside their shells. As the temperatures rose, the flesh inside their shells began to sizzle and pop. Some turtles managed to pry open their shells and escape, but most were trapped inside their own armor and died horrible, slow deaths. The land was quickly transformed into a desolate wasteland, devoid of life. Forests were reduced to smoldering ashes, and the carcasses of dead animals littered the ground. The air was thick with the smell of burning flesh, and the ground was covered in a layer of ash so deep that it killed off all vegetation in its path. The sky was filled with smoke and the sun was blotted out, plunging the world into darkness. The temperature dropped dramatically and snow began to fall, covering the smoldering landscape in a thick blanket of ice. Creatures that had survived the initial impact and the ensuing fires now faced a new challenge: freezing temperatures. Many animals didn't have the proper adaptations to survive in such cold weather, and they froze solid, becoming part of the frozen wasteland. Some animals, like certain species of frogs, managed to survive by slowing their metabolism down to extremely low levels, entering a state called cryptobiosis. Other animals, like certain species of turtles, buried themselves in the mud and stayed there until the weather warmed up. But not all animals were so lucky. Just hours after the asteroid struck, the Earth was on fire. Millions of animals were burned to death in the catastrophic wildfires that raged across the planet. But it wasn't just the fire that killed these animals. Many more died from smoke inhalation or were cooked alive by the intense heat. In the hours after the impact, the world was a nightmarish hellscape straight out of the darkest corners of hell. For those few animals that did manage to survive the impact and the ensuing fires, they faced a new challenge: freezing temperatures. The world was plunged into an ice age that lasted for decades, killing off millions more species and leaving only the most adaptable creatures alive. The impact of the asteroid was so catastrophic that it literally changed the course of history. It marked the end of the age of dinosaurs and paved the way for the rise of mammals. But it wasn't just the asteroid that had an impact on Earth. The impact triggered a series of events that led to some of the most dramatic changes in Earth's history. For example, the impact caused massive climate change that led to an ice age. This ice age lasted for decades and had a profound impact on the planet. It killed off millions of species and paved the way for the rise of mammals. The impact also caused massive volcanic activity. This volcanic activity released huge amounts of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. These gases trapped heat in the lower atmosphere, leading to a runaway greenhouse effect. This effect caused the temperature of the planet to skyrocket, leading to one of the warmest periods in Earth's history. But perhaps the most significant impact of all was the extinction of the dinosaurs. The asteroid's impact marked the end of the age of dinosaurs and paved the way for the rise of mammals. Mammals were small, furry creatures that were well adapted to live in the shadows of the dinosaurs. But with the dinosaurs gone, mammals were free to flourish. They quickly diversified and filled the ecological niches that had been left vacant by the dinosaurs. Within a few million years, mammals were the dominant species on Earth. In conclusion, the impact of the asteroid was a catastrophic event that had a profound impact on Earth. It killed off millions of species, caused massive climate change, and paved the way for the rise of mammals. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about the impact is that it happened at all. To this day, we are still trying to piece together exactly how the asteroid impacted Earth and why it caused such devastation. But one thing is clear: the impact was one of the most significant events in Earth's history. Now watch What If the Asteroid That Killed the Dinosaurs Missed, or check out how the world really ended.